What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Look at this beautiful day in Amarillo, Texas. Actually, it was freezing cold the other day, and now it's beautiful out. We can actually wash the cars, but today we're not washing the cars. Today, people have been asking me this video for a while, and when I originally did the turbo kit, if you guys don't know, this is a 2018 Mustang GT single turbo. When I did the turbo kit, there was no other turbo kits out if you wanted a single turbo. Now, Blow By Racing had made a kit at the point, but they weren't selling it yet. They were still in the testing phase. BL Fab's kit was not out yet. No one's kit was technically out for sale, and I wanted a single turbo. So Joseph and I game planned. We made our own single turbo kit utilizing some CG Fab hot parts. Joseph made all the cold side and the exhaust, and now we have what the car is today.
They got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems. I solve them. I run through the money. Pressure me calling. Look on my blessings. I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm coming. I'm going through something. That's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression is all that I wanted. The phone and affection. I summon it.
Now, a few things I must say, and I will say this twice for the people in the back. You can do this cheaper. Let me say it for the people in the back. You can do this cheaper. So some of the things I had done originally were a little more budget friendly when I started out with the car, but some things happened. The plans changed a little bit for the car. I mean, the plan was always to go fast with the car, but plans on how I wanted to go about it ended up changing as I found out more things about the 2018 Mustang. You know, I picked up a few sponsorships on the way, but this is going to be a breakdown of the cost to run 8s if you wanted my exact setup. Now, here's the thing to remember. My car has a Turbo 400. That's $7,500 right there. You can go and build your 10R80 for $1,500 to $2,500 depending on how many clutch packs you put in there, and you can get a converter for $1,500 bucks. So all in, you could build your 10R80 for under $4 grand. You don't have to do a Turbo 400. So things like that are definitely a big difference. Now, here's another thing. People have ran 8s on stock 10R80s. Do I recommend it? Hell no! I highly recommend you at least put a clutch pack in there. Obviously the converter is going to help you get off the line better, but people, when these first came out, people were running 8s on the stock 10R80. People were running 8s on the stock motor. Now everyone, the 18's been out a while, the Gen 3 Coyote has been out a while, everyone's upgrading the motors, everyone's upgrading the 10R80s, people are upgrading the rear ends, people are starting to find the weak links because, well, now the car's been out a little bit longer. A few other things, some of the lightweight mods that I've done, such as the front and rear brakes, obviously those are helping me go faster, but they are not necessary. You don't have to have TBM front brakes just to run 8s. But this is what I've done to my car to make it go 854 at 160 miles an hour. Now, definitely the car can go a lot faster, but there's some things I need to change around, and we need to be able to turn up the boost. So for everyone that's wondering, the car has gone 854. It's done it a few times. I've backed it up on multiple weekends, and I'm gonna make a video on that. But the car has gone 854, 160 mile an hour on only 15 pounds of boost. Now that's pretty impressive if you ask me. Obviously, my car is a stock Gen 3 Coyote, never opened. It doesn't even have oil pump gears. Yes, I could blow the oil pump gears at any given time, but I'm trying to do things to stay away from that. The reason why I have not done oil pump gears, and people ask me this probably 10 times a day, is because I have a built motor coming that has them in them. So for me, I didn't want to tear apart the front half, put oil pump gears in when I'm gonna have to pay for it twice. They're gonna go in the other motor. I'd have to do the labor twice on it. So the other motor has them already in it. I just didn't want to waste money or time, and I wanted to get the car running, and I kind of just wanted to do it. So if you guys have been around for a while, I made a video titled, it was kind of clickbaity, but I titled it, "She left me for how much she left me when she realized how much I spent on my Mustang." And that was going over the cost of the turbo kit. Now this turbo kit, all in, just the turbo kit, hot parts, cold parts, turbo, oil lines, fittings, is right around 7 grand. Not too bad, not too crazy. But since then, I've made a lot of upgrades. I switched the air-to-air to an air-to-water system. That is a very expensive upgrade. I switched the stainless steel exhaust for a titanium exhaust. That is a very expensive upgrade. I've changed brakes. I've added suspension parts. I've added drag racing seats. I've added 15s in the back. I've added a Turbo 400. I've added trans brake 2-step. Just so many different things that I've added, so I wanted to give you guys the full entire cost. Now I know not everyone is gonna go out and build the same car as me. I'm a little crazy. But this kind of gives you an idea of something you can expect to spend if you wanna go that fast. Now remember, it's still a stock motor, so there's that cost to obviously add if you want to do this reliably. Obviously the stock motor has handled it thus far, but it's not going to go much further. It will break eventually, something will break eventually, but this is kind of just to prove that you can do it. It's just, it's not going to be for very long. So I've got a list right here listing everything that I have modded that would affect the quarter-mile time. Now, I won't add things like headlight tint or wrapping the roof or stickers or any of that because that does not affect the quarter-mile time. However, I do want to include things like the parachute mount and the parachute because technically at any NHRA or IHRA drag track, any track that's really harsh on rules or follows the rules, you're gonna have to have a parachute. You're gonna have to have drag racing seats with harnesses. You're gonna have to have a fire jacket. You're gonna have to have a helmet. Now, one thing I don't have is I do not have a roll cage. A roll cage adds about $4,000 when you're talking labor, install, and material. Anywhere from, I've seen them from $3,500 up to about $5,500, just depending on how you spec it out. If you do swing outs, if you do parachute handle up top, if you do extra gussets to support it, they range from $3,500 all the way up to $5,500. Now, you can go and buy a Fat House Fabrications roll cage, which is pre-cut, ready to weld in, and that's about $2,000 to $2,500 depending on how you spec it out, but then you'd have to pay someone to weld it in. So roll cages are not cheap, but they are necessary to be going this fast. I have technically been running the car illegally. Luckily, the tracks I was at, they weren't showing times, therefore they technically could not kick me out. However, I'm sure they still could have, but they weren't showing times, so I was able to get away with it. But this car does need a roll cage. It is not safe to be running this car this fast without a roll cage. It's not safe to be running without a parachute. It's not safe to be running out without harnesses, helmet, fire jacket, fire suit, all that stuff. All that stuff needs to take into account. So guys, I'm gonna start listing off everything, and if you need to go back and watch it, you can go back and rewatch it, but I'm gonna try and go through this just a little quicker. I'm gonna do a couple detailed things about specific parts, but for the most part, I'm just gonna run through it, give you a price, and then give you a total at the end. So, fuel system. I do have the Lethal Performance 2,000 horsepower fuel system. There's 3 pumps in the back. It's a return style. It's got like a 10-AN feed and 8-AN return, or whichever way it goes. Dual fuel pressure regulators. It is a 2,000 horsepower fuel system, complete kit, everything you need. It's about $2,400. I do have ID 1050X injectors, which are only about $1,000. Now, when I do a built motor, I will be short on injector, so I will be upgrading injectors at that point, and injectors get very expensive. Going from a 1,000cc injector to like a 1,300 or 1,700cc injector, you're talking about like an $800 to $1,000 difference. It's pretty crazy how expensive they get. I do have the CG Fab hot parts kit, so we're utilizing CG Fab manifolds, the cross pipe, and the wastegate dumps. Everything else Joe has created himself, and just for the CG Fab hot parts, it was $1,600. So 2 manifolds, the cross pipe to bring them together, and then the dump tubes. We didn't do exhaust or any of the small other add-ons that you can get because we did create the exhaust ourselves. So this titanium exhaust, now this is just materials. This is not paying someone to weld this. This is $700 in materials for titanium. Titanium is very expensive. So we've got titanium flange, bunch of titanium pie cuts. Those are very expensive because they come pre-cut. O2 sensor bung for titanium, and then obviously the rest of the titanium exhaust. That's $700 just in exhaust. Bog Warner turbo. Originally I had a 76mm precision turbo, but with the way the car was set up, it actually was having back pressure issues. Now I have seen blow by fab, they actually use the 76mm precision turbo that I originally had, and supposedly they're not having any back pressure issues. So it could be the way that it works with my manifolds. Maybe they're using larger runners, they're using a larger exhaust. I'm not sure what the case is, but that turbo, I couldn't even make 6 pounds of boost on. So I did have to upgrade to a 7687 Bog Warner turbo. That was $1,600. I have dual tile 44mm wastegates. It's about $750 for both of those. And then we have the tile 50mm blow-off valve. I believe that's about $250. Now, as far as the intercooler piping with couplers and T-bolts, I kind of just rounded up because there's so many, you can get different couplers, different T-bolt clamps. We made this intercooler pipe ourselves. We powder coated it, all that good stuff. So the intercooler piping with couplers, I pretty much just rounded to $500. because we have had to adjust the piping, but it goes all the way down there, and you can see it goes down here to the actual air to water system, which I will get to next. So this is a custom fabbed by Aldo Welds. Shout out to Aldo Welds, awesome products. Custom made air to water intercooler. I gave him the measurements I wanted and how much horsepower I wanted it good for. This thing's good for like 16 to 1800 horsepower, and it's a $1,600 intercooler. So originally I had a cheap air to air from Treadstone. It worked decently, but when we started upgrading parts, I decided to do the air to water system at the same time we did the Turbo 400, just to kind of get it out of the way. Now, people have gone 8s, people have gone 7s on air to air, but I just figured I didn't want to deal with IAT issues anymore. I did have some, so I just upgraded to an air to water system. Now, with the way the exhaust is ran, it was putting too much heat on the radiator hose right here, so we actually upgraded to the power by the hour. It's an aluminum billet coupler, and then we welded a hard pipe to it from Hyper Automotive, and that was only about like 150 bucks. So I highly recommend you doing that. These are known to pop off. Haven't had any problems since then. This really small overflow tank was about 150 bucks. Can't remember where I got it, but it works perfect. I haven't had any overheating issues yet. I did drive the car during the summer. I did some roll racing and never had any problems with just having this small overflow tank. Obviously, with the turbo being this close to the heads and being this close to like the radiator fans, all that stuff, you really want a turbo heat shield on there. You want to really dissipate heat as much as you can. These are 100 bucks, which for something that small, it seems kind of expensive, but this is one of those things that you just have to have. As far as oil lines and fittings and vacuum lines, I pretty much just rounded that up to 300 bucks. It's a lot more than that actually, because we did a lot of trial and error trying to figure out what we needed, but I rounded it to about $300. You have an ice tank in the back. It's a 10.5 gallon. It's a little bit larger one. The good thing about this, I'll show you guys real quick, is I don't actually have to fill it up all the way. Because it's so large, it stays really cool for a long time, but I've realized that I only have to fill it up about halfway, and it keeps everything nice and cold. This is only about 200 bucks from P&R Welding, and then we do have the Davy Craig's pump, which I believe is about 175 to 200 bucks. It's somewhere in there. And then these fittings right here, this is what I'm talking about. The fittings get super expensive. This is a $25 fitting. I've got another one here because these are 16 and they're very large fittings, and they are very expensive. They're about 20 to 30 bucks a piece. And then we've got the little drain system. This rubber hose, because it is 1-inch line, I'll kind of show you up front where it comes, but it's 1-inch line. It was 100 bucks for 50 feet of it. Where's the other side? I'll go to the other side. So you can see it right there. Comes in right there. There's more of the 16 and fittings, which like I said are super, super expensive. AN fittings are not cheap, people. So a lot of people ask me about having 15s in the rear, because when the S550 first came out, a lot of people were doing a 17x10. The reason for that is because typically it's really hard to get these to a 0 camber. However, I have seen it done, and I actually have upper control arms on the way to help with the camber, but I have seen people get it to 0 camber if you know how to align these correctly. But anyways, you can only run a 15x9.33 with doing the bare brakes. So a lot of people, obviously you want the more contact patch on the ground, the better. So people are doing a 17x10, 17x10.5 to get more contact patch, but they also don't make an ET Pro radial in a 17. And I've had really good luck with the ET Pro radio. It's a small tire, fit a lot of classes with it, and that's the tire that I wanted to run. So I just did the 15x9.33. I cut 125 to 127 60 foots pretty consistently, and I think the car can actually go faster out of the 60 foot once we get some front suspension done and some travel limiters and play with the two-step a little bit more. But I've had really good luck with this. It's actually not rubbing. So it actually hasn't rubbed yet. I think one time it rubbed it just a little bit, but I haven't had any rubbing issues yet. So I do have 15x9.33 welds in the rear. Those were $900. And then I have 17x5 welds in the front. Those are about $1,100. And these are the Weld S77s. Now the tires in the front, those are $320 for the MT ET fronts. And for the 275 Pros in the back, they're about $450 to $475 depending on where you get them from. Now, like I said, you can go 8s on a 17-inch wheel. You don't have to have a 15 in the front. I've seen people go 8s on a stock wheel in the front. You don't have to do it. That's just what I've done. Now, coming back to stuff that adds up super quick, exhaust wrap. I have about $200 in exhaust wrap, and that's really just to help with the heat. Now next year when I take everything out and redo it, I'm gonna take off all the exhaust wrap and get everything ceramic coated, because the exhaust wrap is just ugly to me and it gets stained if you ever leak stuff on it, and it's just a pain in the butt and it fades out. Doesn't look that good. But I have about 200 bucks in that stuff, and you really need that or some type of ceramic coating on everything that's hot. So the car does have TBM front brakes. Those were $1,400. And I do have Bears in the rear, which were $900. Now, I did work out a deal with Bear originally, so I did save some money on the Bear brakes, but I'm trying to give you guys an actual cost just in case they're not willing to work with a deal with you. But I have gotten pretty lucky. Going on to the suspension stuff, the same thing. I've gotten pretty lucky with BMR. You guys can actually use my discount code VANV39 if you buy anything from them, and it helps me out. But BMR has been pretty good to me so far. I do have their front and rear BMR drag springs, which are only about 250 bucks, I believe, which is a really good deal for some springs. I do have the Viking Crusaders in the back, which are the double adjustable shocks. These are for 600 horsepower and up drag racing valves. They are about 560 to 580 bucks. I do have BMR cradle lockouts. You can kind of see it right there. I do have their vertical links also, and all that stuff just really helps with the rear end, helps with tire shake, helps the cradle from moving around, and it really helps me get out of the hole. Staying with the back, I do have Drive Shaft Shop 2000 horsepower axles. These are the brand new boltless style. Those are $1,600. Those are very expensive, but if you have a track that hooks, you're gonna wanna have those because you will break the stock axles. Same thing, I have seen people go pretty fast on stock axles, but eventually you're gonna break them. It's one of those things you just need to upgrade. Now, because I do have the welds and the TBM brakes and the Bear brakes in the rear, I did opt for some ARP studs. It's about 150 bucks, I think, for all 10. And then I did nice billet lug nuts all the way around. Those are about 100 bucks for a pack of 10. Just kind of giving you guys everything that I've done. It's this small stuff too that really adds up. So things I have from Motion Raceworks so far, I have their super nice parachute mount kit, which you can get at motionraceworks.com. They are in stock right now. What's expensive is the parachutes. So this is about a $900 setup with the cable, billet handle, parachute mount, and parachute. The parachute by itself, I believe, is about like $450 to 500 bucks. The parachutes are not cheap, but this is one of those things that's safety, and you don't want to cheap out on safety. Another thing I have from Motion Raceworks is their S550 steering wheel buttons. You have to just get over the beeping noise, but I have two of them. One is for my bump, and then one is for scramble. Now typically this actually goes up here, but I wanted both buttons on one side because my right hand has to be shifting, so I couldn't reach for the scramble very easily. So I put it over here, that way I just use both with my left hand. Now as far as fuel and tuning goes, I do run Ignite E90. I've gone through 2 barrels. They're 500 bucks a barrel shipped to your place typically, somewhere around there, 5 to 550. I've gone through 2 barrels already. Now this thing doesn't get the greatest gas mileage driving it around town, because I do drive it around town here and there. You actually don't use very much at the track, which is why I like taking it to the track, because I really don't use that much fuel. But I've already gone through about $1,000 worth of fuel. Now the car is tuned by John Lund Jr. of Lund Racing. So I have the N gauge, which is about $450 new, and then I've probably spent a little over $1,200 on tunes. The reason for that is because the car, when it was stock, I had it tuned on E85. So everything was stock, just had E85. That's about a $500 tune. And then when we originally did the turbo kit, it was another $500 because he had to build the tune from scratch, because this is a custom one-off system. So that was another $500. And then just going back and forth doing logs and things like that, he's charged me about $100 to 200 bucks. And he's been very reasonable for how much I bug him about adjusting the tunes. But that's just kind of an idea of how much a tune usually costs. It's usually 500 bucks, but I have changed setups on the car a lot. Getting back to the safety stuff, like I said, I do need a roll cage, and those are about $3,500 to $5,500 installed and welded, just depending on who you go through. And that's something you should really think about if you're trying to go this fast. Obviously, you need a cage now just to even run. I think it's faster than $9.99. I believe you now need a cage. The cage that I'm going to get is an 850 cert, and obviously those are a little more expensive, but that's something to think about. If you want to go to the track and consistently run 8s or 9s, you need to have the correct cage. And that's a price you should add in at the beginning if this is your goal. You should not try and go to the track and run these times like I have without running a cage. I highly am against that. So anyways, I do have 2 Kirky drag seats with the fabrics. Those are about $5.50 when you include the tweed fabric. And then I do have some 5-point race quip harnesses. Those are about $150 a piece. And then we do have the super nice Fat Fab fabrication mounts that they bolt right in, makes it super easy to install. Those are about $500 for 2 of those. Now as far as electronics go, I do have a lightweight, hey, my clothes are done. I do have a lightweight Odyssey PC680 battery, and I obviously talked about I already have the N gauge. A few other things that you might not know that I have, and these are things that you might not necessarily need, but since I have the Turbo 400, I do need trans temp gauge. I do need, there's a smooth stage box back here, that's $300. Trans temp gauge is $185. I have a watt box down there, that's $200. Boost controller, $350. And like I said, the N gauge was about $450. And now I do have a shift light up here. These are about $100 to $150. So like I said, these are just cost you might not have to have because you're not gonna go Turbo 400. But for people that are thinking about it, there you go. Now besides the turbo kit, the next most expensive thing was the Turbo 400. Huge shout out to Trey at TG Motorsports, by the way, for helping out with this car. They've done a lot for me, and a huge thanks to all the other companies. But the Turbo 400 is about $7,500. Now that comes with a lot of stuff, okay? It comes with trans cooler, which I have back here with a fan on it. It's actually mounted under. Let's see if I can show you. There it is right there. So there's the trans cooler with the fan on it. Comes with all the lines and fittings. It does come with a 4-inch aluminum custom drive shaft. Comes with the actual Turbo 400, the Hurst shifter, which you saw inside with the shifter plate. Comes with all the fluid fittings. Comes with the cross member that you need to support the Turbo 400. It comes with everything you need. Now, the only problem that I ran into, which no one was really, JPC didn't know this, and we kind of just had to find this out on our own. Nothing against JPC, they just didn't know that it was different. The 2018, you must get the plate in between the trans and the motor that holds the starter, the metal plate. You need one from a 2015 to 2017 S550. You also need the starter from a 2015 to 2017 S550. You also need a companion flange that goes from the diff to the drive shaft from a manual Mustang. So if you had a manual Mustang, this would not be a problem, but since this is a 10R80, the starter's different, the plate's different, and the companion flange in the back is different. Now, they didn't know that because no one had done an A10 to a Turbo 400, and if they did, they didn't tell JPC about it. So if you're wondering, like I said, about $7,500 plus about $300 in extras if you get the starter, the little plate, and the companion flange in the back. Those are things you have to have. The Turbo 400 kit, though, comes with the shifter, the torque converter, which torque converters are not cheap, drive shaft, pretty much everything else to bolt right in. Like I said, it was just kind of frustrating because we had to figure out a few things, but huge shout out to JPC for the help. They've helped me on the converter and helped me look over data on the converter. But now the car is running pretty good on the Turbo 400 and I cannot complain. So before I give you guys the total that I've spent on the car, a few things I want to reiterate. You can do this cheaper. You could do like an on-3 turbo kit with Chinese whirly boys and probably make some power. Are you gonna make it reliably? I don't know. I've never used an on-3 kit, but I've seen people make some good power and make good power reliably. I've also seen people buy on-3 hot part kits and their cold side and then just put on some upgraded turbos because they don't want the Chinese whirly boys. But there is cheaper ways to do this. You could stay on the stock 10R80 and just run it how it is, and whatever happens, happens. Now I've seen people blow up 10R80s on 600 horsepower, but I've seen people run them out on 1200 horsepower. It's just one of those things. It needs to be upgraded, but you don't have to do it right away. Same thing with the motor. The motor, people have gone 8s on, but people have also blown up motors on like 600 horsepower. It's one of those things. So you really need to be keeping an eye on everything. And people wonder why I have all my gauges in that center dash right there. I am literally watching everything. Every time I make a pass, every time I make a test hit, I'm logging the car, and Joe and I are looking over everything. And if I have questions, I send it to Lund and have him look over the logs. That's just what you have to do when you get to this point. it's still pretty crazy when you think about it that a stock motor car can run 8s these days with just a turbo kit. Now you're gonna say, well, you have a ton of money in your car. That gets back to my first point. You can do it cheaper. It's just crazy that these cars are capable of this. It's just whether or not you want them to be reliable or not. Another huge thing I want to reiterate. I have done all of the labor on this myself and Joe. We have put, I don't even want to know how many hours. I'll give you an idea. 3 months on the, well, it was like 2 months on the original turbo kit every night from 8 o'clock to about midnight, and then probably 5 to 6 hours on Saturdays, 5 to 6 hours on Sundays for like a month and a half to 2 months straight. Joseph and I worked on this car non-stop. It was a lot of work. So I saved a ton of money on labor. And the biggest thing about saving money on labor, it's not even that. It's the fact that I put this car together with my friends. I had a really good time doing it. Sometimes it was super frustrating. Trust me, sometimes you want to give up on it. But the thing is, when something breaks on this car, I'm more than likely going to be able to fix it, or at least know how to take it apart to replace that part. So I think working on your own car is priceless as long as you have someone that's really good, such as Joe, helping you out. Now, another big thing, Joe and I have exchanged a few things, but he did all of the welding. That is super expensive. You can figure there's got to be $1,000 worth of labor, probably just in that exhaust, I would assume, because he had, I think, 20 to 24 hours in this exhaust. I don't even know. And that's just welding, because titanium, you can only weld an inch, and then you got to move on and come back. That's not counting the cold side piping. He made custom brackets for the intercooler. He's done a lot of work on this, and we've exchanged a lot of work. So that stuff you got to think about. If you're going to pay someone to do this and you don't have a cool friend like Joe, it's going to get really expensive. Labor is not cheap these days, but you know that you can get it done right. However, if you feel that you are slightly mechanically inclined, I urge you to try and attack it with a friend or a couple friends, or reach out to someone that you might know might be able to help you out, because the more that you can do on the car, the better off you're going to be if the car were to break at the track, or if you're having troubleshooting issues with the car. So along with having a really good friend such as Joe, have a really good girlfriend who's supportive and doesn't care to have date nights at Joe's house. But the sponsorships have really helped me. Now, you guys may say, oh, things were just given to you, but I've kind of worked my butt off to get these sponsors, and I've also done a lot of work, and I've also spent a ton of money. Some of the sponsorships, they're just small discounts, but those things help out. So a huge thanks to BMR Suspension, Motion Raceworks, big shout out to Motion Raceworks, big shout out to Trey at TG Motorsports, huge shout out to Tycon for the help on the exhaust, and thanks to Bear for helping me out originally on the brakes. Now, like I said, I did upgrade to TBMs on the front later on, but Bear did originally help me out, and a huge thanks to them. This car has come together with the help of some friends, help of my girlfriend, and the help of sponsors. Now, you can obviously copy everything I've done. However, you can't copy all the hard work we've put into it. It was a ton of work. And if you guys don't believe me, I've got a ton of videos back starting in like March and April when we first started on the car. So if you guys want to go ahead and kind of watch all the things we have done to the car, you know, we haven't done everything perfect. We've obviously messed some things up. We've had to learn from our mistakes, and we've grown from that, and the car is definitely going faster because of that. So there's still some things that we need to do to the car. The car is not even near done. If you think I'm only going to go 850s, well, you've lost your mind, because I want to go a lot faster, especially after getting gapped by Joe this weekend. Why'd you have to do that, Joe? So, but I am really happy with what the car's done. It's pretty cool that a car can go 850s on a stock motor. I think it's really cool, and it's kind of just the start. I have some huge news coming for the car in like the next week or two that I'm gonna release. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you kind of understand how much money that's gone into this car and how much hours have really gone into this car. There's a ton of hours into this car, but hopefully that helps you guys out on your project. If you guys like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and comment down below what you think is coming next to the Mustang. I'll see you guys on the next one. Man, oh man, I almost forgot to tell you the total. You ready for it? $35,920. Peace.